Hey there guys, how are you today, and welcome to my review of the 2018 Bahrain Grand Prix. And I think before we start, we have to admit that was one fantastic race. I don't know if we can compare it to all-time great races, maybe that's a bit too ambitious, but I think this was a pretty good one, certainly the best one we've had since Baku 2017. So I'm going to start my review by talking about the main headlines from the Grand Prix, and then I'll talk in depth about every team and every driver. Ferrari Sebastian Vettel won the Grand Prix from pole position on his 200th race start. Valtteri Bottas qualified in P3, but managed to jump the other Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen at the start of the race. Reigning world champion Lewis Hamilton started in 9th following a gearbox penalty, but in truth he only managed to qualify in P4, maybe indicating Ferrari's dominance this weekend. At the pit stops, Sebastian Vettel went onto the soft tyre, while Valtteri Bottas put on the harder, medium tyre. This is while Kimi Raikkonen's pit stop went badly with his mechanic getting injured. More about that later in the video. Vettel was on his soft tyres for 39 laps despite the recommended limit of 30 laps, which meant Bottas was able to catch up, but he was unable to overtake Sebastian Vettel despite an attempt on the final lap. Hamilton fought back to P3 despite an incident with Max Verstappen at the start of the Grand Prix. In other news, Pierre Gasly did brilliantly for the Toro Rosso Honda to qualify in the top 10 and finish in P4. Both Red Bull racing cars were out after lap 2, and had they stayed in the race, I'm pretty sure it would have been even more exciting than it was already. Marcus Ericcson got points for Sauber Alfa Romeo, while Williams now seem to be the slowest team in 2018. So now we're going to talk about every team and driver. So Mercedes, the reigning world champions, seemed to be second best this weekend overall. They couldn't match Ferrari's pace despite the so-called party mode in qualifying. As I said, Hamilton did have a gearbox penalty, leaving him P9 on the grid, but in reality he only qualified in P4. Hamilton did well to fight back to P3, but it could have been better. He could have pushed harder to catch up to Bottas and Vettel. He did have an incident with Verstappen, which I'll talk about later because I think it was more something Verstappen did wrong. But Hamilton did have a great triple overtake on Fernando Alonso, Nico Hülkenberg and Esteban Ocon. That was pretty exciting, and Hamilton has admitted in the media, pretty risky. Well, as I said, Bottas jumped Kimi at the start, and he could have got past Vettel at the end of the race, but he just couldn't do it. And everyone seems to be saying that a more aggressive driver could do it. Tell me in the comments, had Hamilton been in Bottas' car, would he have overtaken Vettel? Or what if it was Ricciardo or Verstappen? Or even Raikkonen? What would have happened? Tell me in the comments. But I'm going to say something different here. I haven't really heard it said anywhere else, so I'm going to say it myself. I think we're being a bit harsh on Bottas for criticising him for not overtaking Vettel. And 2 times last season, it was the other way around, with Vettel trying to overtake Bottas at the end of the race, and neither time did he manage to do it. So maybe we shouldn't be criticising Bottas too much, despite Vettel's brilliant drive. And maybe in those times we should have been criticising Vettel more than we did. Now moving on to Ferrari. So Vettel did have a very strong weekend on his 200th race start, no doubt about that at all. Dominant pole position and won the race despite the very old tyres at the end. He admitted on the team radio there was nothing left. He also stood up for Hamilton in the press conference, which was a nice touch because essentially Hamilton called Verstappen a dickhead in the cooling down room, and some of the media are questioning about that, but Vettel actually stood up for him and said that everyone would be upset with what Verstappen did. And I thought that was a nice touch, despite Hamilton and Vettel obviously being great rivals. Well, now moving on to Kimi Raikkonen. He was pretty close to his teammate all weekend, only just missed out on pole position, and was certainly in the fight for victory. I would say he could have played a part at the end of the Grand Prix. However, the pit stop, and this is one of the things this race will be remembered for, the traffic light system seemed to fail, and it went green, but the left rear tyre, I believe, hadn't been put on yet. And he went and he ran over his mechanic and broke his leg. Obviously, we wish the mechanic better. Hopefully he'll be back in the pit lane in a few weeks' time. But this leads us to ask a pretty important question. Do F1 pit stops need more safety? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments. Now, Red Bull. This is a team that had a really disappointing weekend. Daniel Ricciardo broke down on lap 2, where essentially the system seemed to fail. It was as if somebody just turned off the car, and he thought he'd be in the fight for the victory, and all the pundits seemed to agree. And had he stayed, it could have made the finale of the race even more exciting than it was already. while Max Verstappen had an instant trying to overtake Hamilton, which led to Hamilton calling Verstappen a dickhead. He tries to dive up the inside at turn 1, but he squeezed out Hamilton a bit too much, which was a bit too aggressive, and he ran over Hamilton's front wing, which gave Verstappen a puncture. And then he had to do the whole lap with a puncture, and eventually I think it broke his differential, which meant he had to retire. It was only so far back that he was racing Hamilton because he had a crash in qualifying, which left him starting in P15. So yeah, all round a very poor start to the season for the young driver, and overall a disappointing weekend for the Red Bull Racing team. Moving on now to Force India, I would say it was a fairly quiet weekend for the popular team. Ocon did get into Q3 and scored their first point of the season, I believe. Perez had a spin on lap 1, which meant that his race was a bit of a recovery drive, but overall, it is clear they've fallen back a bit from last season. They were delighted to get into Q3, when last season that was a fairly regular occurrence, and it looks like they've got some work to do if they want to maintain their P4 this season. Now, Williams. I would say they're the slowest team of all this weekend, pretty much, sadly. And I think they seem to be the slowest team this season, despite Paddy Lowe being there. Sergei Sorokin, who managed to finish the race this time, so that was one positive, has said in the press that they look like idiots. And I would say that was true, and both Stroll and Sorokin have struggled all weekend. And Paddy Lowe is going to do a lot of work if they're going to save the team this season. And they are the only team not to have scored a point yet in the Constructors' Championship. That also shows how competitive it is this season, of course. Moving on now to Renault. Hülkenberg outdrove Sainz yet again this weekend to get points for the team. But overall, I would say it was a solid weekend for both drivers, though. No real issues. Although Hülkenberg will be disappointed to have been beaten by Magnussen in the Haas. But I would say that I think Renault were hoping to be a bit further forward this season, to be fighting for podiums. And I think they have got a bit of work if they're going to do it. Well, I guess that shows how strong the top 3 teams are this season. Now, Toro Rosso, one of the highlights of the weekend. A fantastic weekend, particularly for rookie driver Pierre Gasly, who got into Q3, the final qualifying session, and finished in P4, picking up 12 points in his second Grand Prix. Fantastic weekend for the young French driver. While Brendan Hartley qualified in 11th, showing Toro Rosso did well all weekend, but he didn't have such a strong race, and I think he was the last of the finishers. Maybe making us ask the question, is Brendan Hartley really good enough? He failed at the start of his career to be in F1, and maybe he's going to fail again. It also shows that Honda have done something to improve, that they managed to legitimately finish in P4. Okay, I suppose you could say, had Raikkonen, Ricciardo and Verstappen finished the race, it may have been P7, but even that would have been pretty impressive for the Toro Rosso. And yeah, so it shows maybe Honda are proving us all wrong. And it leads us to ask the question, were McLaren at fault for the difficulties in the last few years, or have Honda simply improved significantly in 2018? Tell me in the comments. Now, Haas. A mixed weekend, and of course there was a lot of attention on the team going into the weekend after their interesting race in Australia. Magnussen got into Q3 and finished in P5, showing that their pace at the Australian Grand Prix a fortnight ago wasn't some random fluke. However, his teammate, French driver Romain Grosjean, had a bit of a poor weekend. He was knocked out in Q1 and nearly caused a collision with his teammate during the race. He will need to up his game if Haas are going to benefit from their pace in the 2018 season. But it is clear that they have worked on their pit stops, loads of practice this weekend, and they seem to go well, so at least they fixed that issue. Now, McLaren Renault. Overall, I would say they were a little bit downbeat this weekend. Neither car got into Q3, they weren't particularly close even, and that is their aim this season, to get into Q3 in every race, and they haven't done it once yet with either car. But the drivers certainly made up for it during the Grand Prix. Obviously there was some luck with the faster cars retiring. They are though going to need to improve if they're going to regularly fight for podiums in the 2018 season. Do you reckon they're going to get there this season? Tell me in the comments. Finally, Sauber Alfa Romeo qualified towards the back of the grid as expected, but Marcus Ericcson shocked us all to do brilliantly to finish in P9. The word brilliant and Ericcson I thought would never be used in the same sentence, but it has here. While his teammate Charles Leclerc has admitted he is struggling to adapt to Formula 1, but it will be interesting to see how he does in the next few weeks. And he is a rookie driver, we do have to give him some time. But certainly well done to Marcus Ericcson for getting points for the Sauber Alfa Romeo team, opening their points gambit for the 2018 season. So yeah, I've now talked about every team and driver. Tell me who was your driver of the day. The actual driver of the day was Pierre Gasly, and now we'd have to go over that. And yeah, I'll see you guys very, very soon for my preview of the 2018 Chinese Grand Prix, which of course is taking place this weekend.